Dragons have been associated with the world of fairy tales for longer than anyone can remember. But recently, I've noticed a bit of a trend with dragons, especially where modern media is concerned. It seems that media today often depicts dragons as either straightforward antagonists or as misunderstood creatures that are ultimately kind and benevolent. And while I have no problem with either of these interpretations, I think we can all agree that sometimes it's good to have a bit of variety. Which brings me to the topic of today's fairy tale, The Lindworm Prince, or Prince Lindworm, translations vary. A story that begins with a dragon antagonist who transforms into something else. For clarity's sake, I should probably explain that the term Lindworm is derived from an old German word for dragon, though today lindworms are often depicted as large dragon-like creatures with long snake-like bodies and no back legs. So think snake-dragon hybrid. Our story begins, as most do, long ago in a kingdom far, far away, with a king and a queen who were both very happy, except for the fact that they were unable to have children. They must have both come down with a case of barren fairy tale-itis. I hear there's a near 100% infection rate for fairy tale parents that want to have children. But as the queen was out walking, one day, a witch appeared before her and instructed her on how to solve her problem. She told the queen that if she obtained a cup with 2 handles on either side, placed it upside down in the northeast corner of her garden, and left it overnight, the next day when she went to pick it up, she would find 2 roses underneath, one red and one white. Now, roses aren't exactly renowned for their healing properties, but these were no ordinary roses. If the queen ate the red rose, she would conceive a boy, but if she ate the white rose, she would have a baby girl. However, the woman warned her that under no circumstances should she ever eat both roses, for if she did, a terrible fate would befall her. I'm just gonna put this up here. Well, the queen did as she was told, and after much debating, decided to eat the white flower. But she ended up liking the taste so much that she decided to eat the second flower as well, completely forgetting the old woman's warning. Do you ever think that fairy tale endings would be different if the main character had access to post-it notes? That way they could just write themselves little reminders about what not to do, like don't accept food from strangers, make sure you're home before midnight, and don't eat both freaking roses. Anyway, the flowers work as the king goes off to war, because I guess it was that time of the month, and while he's gone, the queen gives birth to a healthy baby boy. But it turns out that the queen was pregnant with twins, and her first child was actually a lindworm. So yeah, let's see here. White rose plus ingestion equals girl, red rose plus ingestion equals boy, and eating the white rose, followed by the red rose, equals 1 boy plus Godzilla. Well, that's fairy tale math in a nutshell, but on the plus side, their kingdom is in really good shape if Mothra ever decides to attack. But only seconds after the lindworm is born, it disappears, and seeing as how the queen was the only one to see it, she decides that it must have just been a dream. Hey, I wonder why the midwife didn't say anything. Oh wow, Norwegian fairy tales are really dark. Well, life goes on, though not for the midwife, and the young baby grows up into a handsome prince, who the king and queen decide should get married, because royal connections plus grandchildren equals a happy king and queen. Fairy tale math. So the prince sets out on a journey to find a princess. That is until his path is blocked by a gigantic lindworm, who informs him that he is in fact his older brother, and thus should be the first to get married. The prince, being the sensible person that he is, then gets the heck out of Dodge and tries to find another route out of the kingdom. But try as he might, he couldn't escape the lindworm. So the prince ended up returning home, where the queen revealed that the lindworm was indeed the prince's older brother. A claim which I'm sure raised more than a few questions regarding the queen's extramarital affairs, but the trio decide that they have no choice but to find the lindworm bride. So the king writes a letter to the neighboring kingdom, saying that he wants a princess to marry his son, not specifying which son, and they in turn send him a princess. However, on the day of the wedding, the blushing bride is less than enthusiastic to discover that her future hubby is actually a lindworm. However, seeing as how it was too late to say she wouldn't have him, which I assume is fairy tale speak for she couldn't escape because the guards were packing, she had no choice but to marry the Lindworm. Fortunately, or I guess unfortunately for her, the marriage didn't last long, as the next morning it was discovered that the princess was gone, and it was assumed that the Lindworm had eaten her. Which begs the question, exactly what had the Lindworm been eating all these years? So that's why the castle opposed so many want ads in the local paper. Well, with the Lindworm now married, and widowed I guess, the prince sets out to find a bride of his own, but is then blocked by the Lindworm, who once again demands a bride. And lather, rinse, repeat, the exact same thing happens yet again, with a princess, a wedding, assumed ingestion, and more demands. But the king has now run out of options, as neighboring kingdoms are not very keen to offer up their princesses just so they can become food for a Lindworm. But while looking out the window one day, the king sees the daughter of the local shepherd and decides that she would make an excellent princess substitute. Because why try to solve your problem when you can just keep adding fuel to the fire and hope you and everything you love doesn't burn up and die? Seriously, he's already eaten 2 princesses. Find yourself a Lindworm exterminator. Medieval PETA is not going to mind. But no, the king instead forces the shepherd to hand over his daughter. Like I said, the king's a real piece of work, who runs into the woods lamenting her fate. But who should appear in her darkest hour but a witch with the answer to all her problems. So wait, is there some kind of rule that Norwegian witches can only solve the problems of troubled women they find wandering around in the woods? Because if so, then that would actually explain a lot about this fairy tale. Anyway, just like before, the witch gives the girl explicit instructions on how to deal with her problem. So on the night of her wedding, the girl does as she's instructed, and asks for 10 snow-white shift dresses, a tub of lye, a tub of fresh milk, and as many whips as a boy could carry in his arms, to be brought to her bedchambers. After she and the Lindworm retired to their room, she dressed herself in the 10 shift dresses, and each time the Lindworm asked her to take off a shift, she in turn asked him to shed a skin. This continued until the Lindworm had shed all 9 of his skins, leaving behind nothing but a huge mass. After this, the shepherd's daughter then dipped the whips in lye and started using them on what was left of the Lindworm. Yeah, this story gets a little bit PG-13 at times. She then soaked the mass in fresh milk and finally dragged it into bed with her, where she put her arms around it and fell asleep. This woman has a much stronger stomach than I do, though I guess it beats being eaten. Well, the next day the king and a couple of his subjects go to check on the Lindworm and his new bride, probably more than half expecting to find that the Lindworm has devoured her during the night. When, lo and behold, they discover that the Lindworm has transformed into a handsome prince. Everyone was overjoyed at the news. Prince Lindworm and the shepherd's daughter were remarried with much pomp and circumstance, and everyone lived happily ever after. Except the 2 princesses who were eaten, the ruling family and citizens of the neighboring kingdoms, who I assume were probably still a bit angry about the whole princess eating thing, and I'd assume the Lindworm Prince had to go through some extensive therapy as he spent the first 20 or so years of his life as a dragon, and also ate some people, which I assume is bound to cause at least a little bit of psychological damage. But everybody else was fine.